Hi, welcome to this video. We're just doing a little bit of a cleanup of our Server A, B and Windows 10. We're going to install the extensions driver pack into those to make them work a little better. And then we're going to promote Server A to being a domain controller. And we'll look at then joining Server B and Windows 10 to that domain. So if we just open up our, we've got all these virtual machines running, and on Server A, in order to install the driver pack, you just go to Devices and then down to Insert the Guest Editions CD image. And it should auto run, but if you're impatient and can't wait, just grab to the thing here and you'll see it's in there. And you can go to the AMD 64, the 64-bit version, and double click on that and install the guest editions. Install the driver. Now this inserts a better graphics and mouse driver, and it normally asks you to do a reboot, so I generally say yes, go ahead. So while that one's happening, we'll move across to Server B and do the same thing. Insert the guest edition CD. And let's just tell it to run. Install the driver because we trust it automatically. And we'll do a reboot. And the only other Windows thing that we've got installed at the moment is the Windows 10. Going to do the same thing on that. Let's just, for some reason our Windows 10 is really slow at the moment, but we'll insert the guest edition CD. And let's have a look. This PC, there's our disk. Let's double click it and run it. Next, install. Trust the driver and install it. And it'll want to do a reboot, so that's quite fine. So I'll flip back to Server A, just make sure that the optical drive is no longer in there, so it doesn't appear like it is. That's good. So let's Control-Alt-Delete and then do a password 9. Let's get back into it. We'll do the same thing on Server B. Input through the keyboard. Password 9. And so on our server here, you'll notice that it's automatically resized itself. So I will jump back in on this one, password 9. Okay, so back onto our Server B, I'm just going to change the screen resolution and put it to the 1024x768, so it's just a little bit nicer to see. keep the changes. Same thing with server A. Keep the changes, and we'll do the same thing with our Windows 10. Display settings. Okay, so I think we've got to go to advanced, change that to 1024/768 and apply it and keep the changes. Okay, so we've got our 3 machines here now, back to the original size, but they have a better driver, so we can just move our mouse in through each of these. We'll find a much smoother mouse and keyboard experience by having the drivers installed. The next thing I like to do, just for the sake of not having things mess around when I'm playing with the virtual machines, is to change the power configuration. So what I'll do here is I could go to the firewall. We've already got that turned off. Yep, that's all off, so that's good. So on the control panel, if I go to a category of small icons, I can see the power options, and in the power options what I do is I just change it to not turn off the display, and save the changes. I'll change some of the other plans as well, and that one as well. So basically I just don't want these things turning off and then requiring me to enter usernames and passwords, because we often leave these virtual machines running for extended periods of time. I just want to be able to flick between them without having to worry about you know, having to re-enter usernames and passwords. So right mouse click and go to control panel, change the category to small icons and go to the power options and change these things to never turn off. Okay, save the changes. Do I need to do that on here? Probably. Control panel. Power options. Okay, so that's changing all the power so these things don't turn off when you're in the middle of doing stuff. So now it's really just a matter of now promoting these machines. So what I'm going to do is promote my server A into being a domain controller and DNS server, and then getting server B and the Windows 10 machine to join that domain. So back to server A, and we'll start the server manager, and we need to add roles and features. Next, next, and next. And what we want to add is the Active Directory domain services. Add the features and go next. Next and next, and install. So this shouldn't take too long. So it says it's succeeded, so we'll go close. You'll notice there's a notification here which says to promote the server to being a domain controller, so I can just click on that. And this is going to be a new domain controller in a new forest, so I'm adding a new forest. And the root of the domain I'm just going to call getwellmedicalpractice.com, so GWMP.com. Okay, so it's saying what the functional forest and domain levels are. Currently it's set to what the current operating system is. We're going to change this back to Server 2008 because we may well have a Server 2008 machine in our environment. Actually, it's not allowing me to change it. Okay. So let's go back to 2008 and we'll change our domain functional level back to Server 2008 as well. Okay, so we've got them back to 2008. This machine will be a DNS server, and you'll notice that the global catalog server is ticked by default, which we can't change. The first domain controller in the forest must be a global catalog server. The global catalog server is the one server that allows people to log into a domain. So we need to have one of those. Password's just going to be the standard password, password 9, which of course in the real world you would never do. The delegation of a DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone couldn't be found. We're not really worried about that because we're going to turn this machine into a DNS server anyway. So we'll just go next. And it gives us the NetBIOS domain name, which is GWMP. Now NetBIOS is a non-routable protocol, so this is the name that works just within this subnet, within this broadcast domain. So within the 192.168.10.0/24 subnet, we can just use GWMP, and that will use NetBIOS and find devices in that network. So we'll just go next. That's in comparison, of course, to TCP, which is routable. Okay, so we've got the data store log and sysvol folders. I don't propose to change any of that. There's a lot of software that you install later on which supposes that those folders are in the default location, so good idea to leave them there. Next. This gives us a preview of what we've selected. We'll go next. It'll do a prerequisite check just to make sure whether what we've selected will actually work. And normally we'll get a couple of warnings here, but nothing too critical to stop us from being able to actually turn it into a domain controller. Okay, so it says green tick with we can prerequisite checks passed successfully. We did get some warnings. The first one is a allow cryptography algorithms compatible with Windows NT4. So it's saying that we've got issues with our cryptography algorithms. It's not something we need to worry about. The delegation for the DNS server could not be created, so it doesn't matter, this thing's going to be a DNS server anyway. And then everything else is passed okay, so we'll just go install. Now it's a waiting game. So now it's configuring a DNS server service on this computer. Turns it into a DNS server. Okay, so we're being signed out. Yep, there it is, it's doing a reboot. Now once you've turned it into a domain controller, you'll notice that the login takes a fair bit longer. That's typical of a server. It has many more services that it starts up. I'll just pause it here. Okay, so it's now rebooted, so we're going to restart it, and you'll notice that it starts up with the domain name. So this as is the administrator account in the GWMP domain. Okay, so we've made a domain controller, and if we have a look at some of the administrative tools, we'll now see things like Active Directory domains and trusts and things like that. Let's go Control Shift. Okay, so I'll just minimize this out of the road for the moment. What we really need to do is to get the other computers to join this domain. And what I'm going to do is, well, I've got the administrative tools down here as well, so I've got them on the desktop. The important thing to look at is we turn this thing into a DNS server as well. So if we open up the forward lookup zone, getwellmedicalpractice.com, we can see that our server A is the host. It's the name server as well, and also the start of authority. Okay, so our DNS all looks to be working quite well. So what we're going to do is now go to our server B. We're going to check to make sure that actually, if we run a command prompt, and do an IP config/all, we can see here that one of our DNS servers is 10.2. Now we need that before this computer can join the domain. So in order to join the domain, we're going to right mouse click on the computer, this PC, and we can see here we're server B and we're currently in a work group. So I'm going to press change settings and change here, and we could change the name, but what we really want to do is type in the Get Well Medical Practice. Now, because I'm in the same subnet as server A, there's all I really need is the NetBIOS name or version of it. If I put Get Well Medical Practice or GWMP.com, it's liable to fail. Well, it didn't. It actually passed. So but I could have just gone without the .com, and it would also get in because it picks up the NetBIOS version of it. So I'm going to type in the administrator account. And this computer will join the domain. It's taking its time actually. And on our server A, what we can do is run Active Directory users and computers, and expanding out the domain controllers, we can see server A, and the computers we can see server B is in there now. So it was welcome to the domain, so it did actually get there. Must restart the computer. Restart now. So while that's restarting, we're going to flick across to our Windows 10 machine, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get it to join the domain. Probably first of all we should look at, let's do an IP config/all. Oops, helps if you can spell. And we can see here that we've got a DNS server of 10.2, which is what we need. Okay. So again on this PC, down to properties, and you can see we've got, well, our desktop name here is not really optimal, but we're still in a work group, so we're going to change both of those. I'm going to change the computer name to say Win 10, and I'm going to change the domain to Now here's where using the GWMP just like that will not work. And that's because that's using the NetBIOS version of the name, and NetBIOS is not routable, so it won't go from the subnet that we're in to where the server subnet is. So I need to put the .com on. .com. And again, the administrator account and the password. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. Welcome to the domain. And I'm going to restart now. Go back to Windows 10. If I do a refresh on here, we can now see that we've got our Windows 10 machine and our server B in. So we've created our domain, gwmp.com, with our server in there, and we've now joined both the second server, server B, and our Windows 10 machine, which was in a different subnet, to that domain. And that's what we wanted to achieve for this particular video.